Hello, Ardmore. This is Pastor Michael and Carrie Rogers from The Jar, and we're excited to be coming to you in our last recording at HFB Wilson Center. We're really excited about that, and we've got some announcements to share with you.
That's right. So like Michael said, this is our last week here, and starting Sunday, August the 7th at 4 p.m., we're going to be at our new location at 702 8th Street Northeast, right here in Ardmore,
right.
In the Solid Rock Ministries building. I think we've shared this with you guys before, but they are going to be basically hosting us permanently until further notice. So that's going to be our permanent location, and we are very excited about that. This next Sunday on the 31st, Michael and I will be out of town. We are going to be co-teaching together at one of the church that supports us in our ministry.
That's New Life Church in Odessa, Texas.
In Odessa, Texas. So we'll be gone for the weekend so that we can spend time with that congregation and those believers. And so we're super excited to meet the people there in Texas. So no meeting next week, and then we will be launching August 7th.
That's right.
At the new location. So join us, hopefully, in a couple weeks. And the only other thing I would say is that if you have any prayer requests, anything that you feel that you need prayer for, you can never ask enough believers to pray for you when there's something going on in your life. And so if you have something that you need prayer for, please comment below or send us a message, and we'd be happy and would love to pray for you.
And there is if you go onto our website at thejarministries.net, there is a page in the home banner. You can see prayer. You can click that, and you can submit a prayer to us. It'll come to us through the email. So that's another way to get it to us too.
Absolutely. All right. So as Michael said, we're going to be in John chapter 4, verses 1 through 30. And I am super excited about this study. This is one of my top 5 favorite stories of Jesus in the New Testament. And this is the story of the woman of Samaria and the woman at the well. And so we're very excited to share that with you guys this evening. So we want to start off with a question that we want to ask you. And that question is there someone in your life that took the time to choose you?
You know, I remember being out on the playground, like in elementary school and middle school, and we'd have time for recess for 1 or 2 games of basketball, and how we would all line up, and there'd be 2 captains, and they would pick, you know, and you always wanted to be somewhere near the front, but you absolutely did not want to be last. You wanted to be chosen way before that. So it may be something as simple as that, but it might also be that a headhunter called, and they found out you were so good at your job, they want you to be hired and bring you on to their place of work or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to be chosen. So who really worked in your life and chose you?
Yes. So think about that for a few seconds, and then we will begin in verse 1. All right, so if you open your Bibles to John chapter 4, verses 1 through 30, and if you don't have a Bible, we encourage you to download the YouVersion app on your phone. It's free, and you can get all different translations of the Bible. Also, there are different prayer journals and study plans where you can learn more beyond what we're teaching. So I encourage you to download that app, even if you have your own Bible. It's nice to be able to look at, and especially to look at the different translations. So we're going to start in verse 1. It says, "Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John," and we're talking about John the Baptist here, and it says, "Although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria." And we really firmly believe, and a lot of scholars believe, that he deliberately chose that Samaritan road. It was a very unpopular road for the Jews, but yet it was the shorter route. And the reason why it was not a popular route is because the Jews and the Samaritans had a long history of racial tension.
Yes.
They did not like each other.
Right.
And it went all the way back to an Assyrian conquest, and there was a lot of conflict and a lot of racial, basically hatred towards one another. And so a lot of Jews would not take this route or this road because they wanted to avoid any conflict. But for whatever reason, we really don't know why, but something compelled Jesus to take this road.
Yeah, some people think that it was just, for some reason, he had to, because the Pharisees knew how popular he was becoming, that it wasn't his time for them to question him, and so he was trying to avoid Jerusalem to make that happen. But it might have been something as simple as Jesus in the Spirit knew that there was a divine appointment waiting for him, and so he had to take the tough road because he knew that God was directing him to that place.
Right. So in verse 5 it says, so he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. So in verse 6 it says, Jacob's well was there, and so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour. So Jacob's well, we find it in Genesis chapter 33, and that is, we believe, was Jacob's well. And just to talk about the first couple things, we noticed there was one, wells were always located, sorry, there's a fly that is buzzing around us and it's driving me crazy.
It does every week.
Wells were almost always located outside of the city along the main road for travelers to stop. And so twice each day, the women would come to draw water from that well in the morning and the evening, right? So that they didn't come in the hottest part of the day. But yet here in the passage, it clearly states that he was there about the 6th hour, which would be around noon, our time. And so it was the hottest part of the day. They'd been traveling with his disciples for a while down this road, and they decided to stop, and he decided to rest at this specific well, which happened to be Jacob's well. Verse 7 says, a woman...
And Jacob's well also, it was largely, it was fueled by rain and things like that, so it didn't have a live spring underneath it.
Right, there was no exact spring connecting to that well. It collected dew and rain down at the bottom, so you had to dig really deep to get to the bottom of that well. So in verse, and we're going to come back to that, you'll see why we said that in just a minute. So in verse 7 it says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. For his disciples had gone away in the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So we know that living water throughout Scripture, in Psalms and Jeremiah, it talks about God being a fountain of life, a spring of living water, thirsting after God. So when Jesus makes this comment about being the living water, I really do believe that she would have questioned that for a moment. She would have thought to herself, okay, he's using some terms here that I know about.
Yeah,
right?
it often referenced the Holy Spirit, and so she may have had, but when we talked about this before, the question is, was she looking at it from an earthly perspective or a heavenly perspective? And so she shows us in the next verse.
Right. So in 11, it says, the woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank it from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. And Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. Right? So he's pointing to the well, and he's saying, look, anyone who drinks of this water out of this well is going to be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life.
I think it's great because he's doing the same thing with her that he did with Nicodemus in chapter 3. He's challenging her to look at it from a heavenly perspective, and he's waiting to see how she's going to respond to it.
Right. So in 15 it says, the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to have to, thirsty or have to come here to draw water." So I almost think that she's being a little sarcastic here. I think she's saying, okay, if you can do that, then I never have to come back to this well ever again. Right? She, at this point, is looking at it from a physical perspective, not an earthly or a spiritual perspective. She's looking at solely as a way for him to miraculously make this water come out of this well, where she never has to come back again.
Right, and so she's looking at that and she's thinking, well, this would be great because then I don't have to deal with everything else.
Right.
And so we're going to see that here in a minute. But that also explains Jesus' disciples are gone. He has nothing to draw the water from. The well is deep. This is why he's asking her to give him a drink. And so God has put him right in the right place to need just the right thing, to have the right conversation for this one person.
Right. So Jesus' response to her, so she said, "Sir, give me this water," right? So I don't have to come here to draw the water ever again. He responds, he waits, and he looks at her and he said, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." And Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one," I apologize, I'm having all kinds of malfunctions today. "The one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." And the woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet." So basically in this verse, what we're seeing is she's been married 5 times. She's now living with the man that she's not married to. And how would Jesus have known that? He wouldn't have known that. And so when he revealed to her something that was personal, something that she didn't know he wouldn't have known. He's a stranger from out of town. He wouldn't have known that. All of a sudden she realizes, okay, this man is a little different. He's more different than I thought.
And she perceives that is connected in some way to the prophetic office. And so here's Jesus. He's not doing "thus saith the Lord." He's not predicting the great future or anything, but he has knowledge from God that he shouldn't have. And he's sharing it with her, and she sees that and goes, that's part of the prophetic office. I perceive, which doesn't mean I think you do. She's saying, I gathered all the evidence, I'm taking a look at it, and this is what my conclusion is. You're a prophet.
Yeah. I think the other thing, too, is right here, we learn 2 really important things about this woman that come to light. One is that she's known to be living in sin.
Right.
Because even though Samaritans and Jews had a racial tension, they still came from that Jewish belief.
They shared a moral ethic.
Correct. Yeah. And so she is known to be living in sin in this moment. The other thing is that here sits a Jewish man in a public place for all to see, where all the women of the town come together to draw water. No respectable Jewish man would be caught talking to her. Like, that would be a definite no-no.
Yeah.
Like, people, no, that's just not going to happen.
Racial issue, a gender issue, timing issue, a publicity issue. In every way, Jesus had every reason to pass this woman by.
The other thing is, notice that she came by at the same time that Jesus was sitting there, which was around noon. And like I had stated earlier, most of the women came in the morning and in the evening to draw water, when it was the coolest part of the day. Here she is at the hottest part of the day drawing water. And so a lot of scholars believe that that's because, and we can assume, it's because probably of all the gossipy women, right? When she came to the well, the women were, and each other chit-chatting, back-talking her, or it could have even been to the point where because this was the fifth man, 5 husbands, and this is the 6th man she's living with, they banned her.
Yeah.
Basically said, don't come around here while we're here.
Right.
So she could even have been to the point where she was banned to go to the well at the evening and morning, and she was there only at noon, because that's the only time that she could come and get water.
Yeah, you remember that if they share a moral ethic, they're both kind of coming from the law. And part of the law is not just that you can't sin, but also you're not to touch someone who has been living in a sinful state. So they might have banned her so that there was no chance that they would bump into her whenever they were doing their own thing.
So I can only imagine on her way to the well every day.
Yeah, in the hot.
That, her sandals clapping against the dirt and the hot earth. And we know about hot right now, right?
Right.
And she's not only having physical discomfort every day as she's going to the well to draw water, she's also having an internal and a spiritual struggle every day. One, because it almost appears as if she might have been shunned from the rest of the women in the town. 2, that she's having to come to the well at a time when nobody else is there because they basically told her you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot going on every day when she's walking to and from that well. More than just the physical part of it, there's the internal and spiritual part too for her.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that.
Oh,
that
mental, emotional, social, in every
Right.
way, this shows that this woman was in need.
Well, and it's not just on the way to the well. Think about it
Yeah.
too, when she draws the water and puts it in her jars, right?
Yeah.
And the jars are heavy. They're not
Right.
light. And so she's pouring, these gallons of water into this clay jug, putting them on her shoulders and on top of her head, and carrying that in the hottest part of the day all the way back to the town and to her house.
Well, I like that you brought out that she was being a little sarcastic, because one of the things that we know about this woman is she was pretty smart. So how she responds, she's making the transition Nicodemus couldn't in the next couple of verses, where she's starting to think with a heavenly perspective as she's talking to Jesus.
So then let's go to verse 20. It says, our fathers worshipped on this mountain. You say that in Jerusalem, this is the Samaritan woman talking to Jesus. After she says, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. She then follows it up with saying, our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. And Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know, and we worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. So do you want to talk about the salvation? Talk about that for just a moment?
Yeah, so racial tension, gender tension, social tension. There was also religious tension, because the Samaritans believed that they were supposed to worship at Shiloh instead of Jerusalem. And so that was part of the issue that they had with each other. And so Jesus is looking at this and helping her to see, and lovingly doing so. You're in the wrong, but it's not going to matter. You're saying that you should worship on Shiloh. There was a time when Shiloh housed the Ark of the Covenant, and that would have been appropriate, but the time now is that Jerusalem is where the temple is, and that's where you should be worshiping. But you know what? It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong, because there's a time coming, and then he kind of corrects himself. Actually, it's now here where there is a different kind of worship that is going to happen, and that's in verse 23.
Yes. So in 23 it says, but the hour is coming and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth.
Man, she jumps right on that, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm. She comes right back and says, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. And Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he.
And that gets ruined because of our English grammar and the way we would say that. That's the right way in English to say it. But what he basically says is, I am speaking to you. And she would understand, I just got goosebumps just saying it. She would understand that the I am at the beginning of that is a reference to him being the Son of God and being like God and therefore sharing God's name. I am speaking to you. So when Moses was visited in the burning bush and he said, who do I tell the Israelites is sending me? God says his name is I am. It's the only time God gives himself his name. I am. It's Yahweh or Jehovah. It's the tetragrammaton, and it's the opportunity for everybody to know that he is present and he is the present. He is everything. And so when Jesus says to this in the Greek, it's I am speaking to you. And wow, I can't even imagine. This is the first time that he's actually admitting who he really is.
Yeah. Wow. So then in 27 it says, just then his disciples came back. They marveled that he was talking with a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But no one said, what do you seek, or why are you talking with her? So no one questioned him, but they did look at each other like, what is
Can you
he
imagine?
doing?
This big group of Jewish men are coming up, and the guy that they've decided to follow, who's supposed to be holier than everybody, he may be the Messiah. We're following him because we think so. And he's talking to a Samaritan woman like it's no big deal.
Yeah.
And it offends their sensibilities.
Yeah.
But they don't know what to do with it. Like, what do I do? I guess I just wait around and see what happens next.
Yeah.
But Jesus knows what to do.
Yeah. So into verse 28 says, so the woman left her water jug. She just left it there.
Yeah.
She didn't even take
She
it back with her.
forgot what she was
forgot
there
about
for.
it.
There was a bigger purpose all of a sudden.
So the woman left her water jar and went away into town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? And they went out of the town and were coming to him.
And what this means is the Samaritan woman was the very first evangelist who knew he was the Christ and went and told everyone. That's amazing.
So our challenge for you all tonight is be the chosen one.
Yeah.
Right? This woman was made out of common clay, like you and me. Everyone else saw her that way, but Jesus saw her in a different way.
Yeah.
He chose her. He chose her above everybody else to relay to her and to others that he was the Christ. First of all, he chose a woman. Second, he chose a Samaritan woman. And third, she was a woman who had a lot of sin in her life.
Yeah.
She had a lot of issues. She had a lot of inner turmoil. She was not perfect at all. She was the last person that the disciples or anybody else would have thought would have been chosen for Jesus to come to and say, I am the Messiah. I am here, and the kingdom is now. And she was chosen out of everyone else for that to be the case. And it's just beautiful to
Just
me.
imagine what
It's
that
beautiful.
means. What that means is Jesus did not come. He gave Nicodemus the same opportunities. He allowed Nicodemus to come and see him. Nicodemus came and said, I want to know, are you from God or are you not? I see you doing these signs. And Nicodemus had already heard about Jesus doing all this healing and all these other things. We have no indication in the passage that this woman knew who Jesus was. She had never seen a healing. She had never seen a demon possession that was healed. She knew nothing else about anything except that he saw her, that he knew her, and that he chose her. And you know what that means? That means no matter where you are, no matter who you are, this is what Jesus is doing for us today. He sees you, he knows you, and he chooses you anyway. And all we have to do is believe that it's possible to be chosen. And I don't know, I always think of Harry Potter when I think of the chosen one. I'm a little bit of a nerd, I'm sorry. But you know, he's the chosen one. He's the one that's going to take care of everything. Jesus comes along and says, you know what? You're all chosen ones. You get to be a chosen one too. You get to be the one that changes the world. And that's what this lady does. She allows herself to be chosen, and then she goes back to her town. Can you imagine the people in the town? They know this woman to be a woman of ill repute, and she comes back and she's like, hey, come see this guy who told me everything I ever did. And they listen to her.
He knew stuff about me that nobody else knew.
Yeah. You know what that means? That means she was already experiencing the living water, and it was already flowing out of her to everybody else. And it's just amazing. It's just a fun story.
And I think the other thing too is, Jesus didn't come to take away our challenges.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't.
Good point.
He didn't look at her and say, okay, now you've got to fix all this stuff in your life.
Right.
Right? At least with this story anyways.
Right.
He does later on. But in this one, he doesn't tell her, I'm going to take away your internal challenges, the things that are happening from your past and present. I'm not going to take those challenges away necessarily, but I am going to change you from the inside out. Right. And when that happens, when I fill your common clay jar, when I fill you with my living water, right, I'm going to change you from the inside out. And when that happens, you're going to start seeing things not from an earthly perspective, but from a heavenly perspective, from a spiritual perspective.
Right.
God is spirit, and he is not just, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but he's a spirit for everyone. Everyone can come to him. Not the Samaritans, not the Jewish people, not these people over here, everyone. And I also love this passage because it really speaks to who we are at the jar.
Yeah.
This is one of our main stories that is the reason why we chose it. We always say, be filled to be emptied.
Right.
And that's what the Samaritan woman did.
Yeah.
She wasn't perfect. She wasn't everything that everybody thought she should be. But God chose her, filled her with his living water, changed her from the inside out in that moment. And then she went and emptied her jar to others in the town and said, the Messiah is here. I've seen him, and he's real.
Yeah, I don't think it's a minor detail that she left her water jar, because what she's doing is she's leaving that earthly perspective, the water that's in the jar, and she's taking the heavenly perspective and taking the living water to everybody else. So you have a challenge for the not yet?
I do. So for those of you who are watching all the way through and you are not yet a believer, but you're trying to figure things out, I want to challenge you to let yourself be chosen. Whatever your past is, Jesus doesn't care. He can change you from the inside out. He can fill you with his living water. He can fill your vessel, your common clay jar. And if you let him do that, you have such a powerful, powerful gift. There is nothing more powerful than when somebody allows God to change them, and then your testimony spreads out through all the people that are around you. And when that happens and they see the change in you through your testimony, when you say, I found the Messiah, I found the one who can fill me up, and you're emptying all that, it's overflowing, right? Because we both believe when God fills your jar, he doesn't fill it to the rim. Mm-hmm. He fills it overflowing.
Right, that's right.
If you believe that he will, he will. And so as that living water overflows and is emptied out onto others, they're going to find that living water too. They're going to want to drink of that water, not from a physical perspective, but from a spiritual perspective, internally. Because, our bodies, these are earthly bodies. These are just shells. And we're carrying our spirit inside of us, inside these shells. And we have to fill up the spiritual part too. You know, we focus so much on the physical body and how the body has, you know, drink this many water, you know, 8 milliliters of water.
You probably know somebody who carries a big jug of water around with them, trying to make sure they stay hydrated.
It's good for you.
And it's good, yeah.
You know, you need to be drinking all of that water a day. But Jesus is saying right here, it's more than just your physical body that needs to have that water. It's your spiritual. Your spirit needs that water too. Because that's really what you're filling, not just your body, but your spirit.
Yeah,
So.
that brings you back. If you're not yet, that brings you back to verse 10. If you knew the gift of God, the grace that he has, and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. So that means all you have to do is ask, God, give me that living water. And he'll give it to you today. That's just good stuff. For our alreadys, if you are already working from a heavenly perspective and you recognize this, then I would remind you of the verse that we got our name from, which is 2 Corinthians 4:7. But we hold these treasures in jars of clay to show that surpassing power is from God and not from us. And so we may have broken jars and we may struggle, but the truth is that God is still filling us up. And it's okay if there's a few cracks. That just means more of what is filling us gets out. And often that's what he'll do, is use those cracks to help you, to spill out into other people. So already, this is your opportunity to be the Samaritan woman and go into town and tell everybody what God has done for you. So we just want to challenge you to recognize that if you understand the gift that God has given you, that living water is going to spring from you to everybody you know. First, by your example. Second, by your questions. And third, by your statement of what the gospel is and what they can do to receive God too. Tell the people that you love the most that God chose them too. Yes. That's good stuff.
It's good stuff. All right. Well, we hope that you've been blessed by this teaching, and we hope that you will allow God to choose you, and that also you'll allow God to fill your jar so that it can be emptied to overflowing to others. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks on Sunday, August 7th at 4 p.m. at 702 8th Street Northeast in Ardmore. Have a great week.